Welcome to our 6th episode of Two Tankers and a Cat. We are your hosts, Charlie.
And I'm Russell.
And I gotta tell you right now, Lightning the cat is literally on the back of my chair. She's been jumping around since we've got here. So if you hear strange noises or meows or you hear little metal balls getting smacked around in the back, it's Lightning trying to put in for the show.
Yeah, she's wound up tonight. That's for darn sure.
Well, Russell, before we jump in, I know you have some announcements and some pretty exciting stuff that is new. Can you give us what's coming up and some other stuff?
Yeah, I've got a couple of announcements here and then a couple shout-outs. I'll start with the announcements. I do want to tell all you guys out there that I did set up a telephone number where our podcast fans can leave us a voicemail. That number is 785-380-9844. 785-380-9844, and I will put that on our Facebook page and also the podbean.com, our server page where we've got our podcast. The reason for this number, you can use the telephone number to leave us a voicemail with your comments, even if you just want to give us a quick hello. You can also give your recommendations for any future podcasts that you think we might be interested in researching and doing for our podcast. But what we want to do with these voicemails is actually play the voicemails on our future podcasts.
So you're saying, like, my sister Marie is a big fan and she's always been following us in day one. She could just call this number and say, hey, something cute, and we could put it on the podcast?
Yeah, that's the way it will work.
Well, if you're listening to this now, give us a call. We'll put you on there and make you part of it.
Yeah.
We make it a tank-related question, or just a simple hey from Texas or wherever you're from, and no profanity, please.
Oh yes, please keep it clean. I mean, I can still edit it, but please try to keep it clean.
Now, we have some big news. I can't wait to tell you guys this. Russ, tell us about the big news.
Yeah, our big news, we've got some really exciting news about a trip that Charlie and I both took to Fort Benning, Georgia, during Veterans Day of this year on November 11th, 2018. We learned so much from this trip. Truly look forward to include some of the things that we got to see and learn about on this exciting trip in our future podcast. I mean, we've got so much content from this trip that it's just incredible.
And we're so grateful to the men and women of the Army base out at Fort Benning, whether it was the security check-in or just at the PX. The entire service out that is amazing. The people at the restoration, the military just walking around answering questions, just a great group of guys.
Our trip actually included visiting an open house at the U.S. Army Armor and Calvary collection there on the base, and it was so simple to get in. I mean, you can pretty much get onto any Army base anymore with your proper ID and checking in at the front gate and going in and seeing these museums that's out there on these bases. It was just incredible.
Now, when we say it was easy to get on the base, understand we are also police officers, but we live in a state where our state ID is recognized as being a correct federally guidelined ID,
yes,
and passports and stuff like that.
Yeah,
we don't have any felonies. We don't have anything that's going to show up.
They do background checks and everything on you when you do check in at these.
It's basically gates. NCIC, and they're looking, and you take one look at me, and they're like, "Oh, it's an old fat guy that wants to look at tanks,"
yeah,
and his buddy. So they really don't give us too much. But if you go in with a smile on your face and you treat them with respect, you're going to get respect back because these people really know their respect.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've ever been to Georgia, but that was basically one of my first trips to Georgia, and Atlanta's airport is efficient, but good God, it's huge.
Oh, yeah. It blew my mind. That's probably one of the bigger airports I've ever flew in and out of.
If you're going to go through TSA in Atlanta, Give yourself time.
Yeah.
We gave ourselves a ton of time.
Yes, we did.
But we sat around and we had a wonderful meal at the Varsity. I guess that's kind of a famous restaurant down in Georgia. We had a great time, even at the airport. Did some shopping there, and then we're like, all right, time to go back to Kansas City.
Yeah.
It was a good flight. We
It
used,
really was.
Southwestern.
Yeah, it really was.
I prefer to fly United because my daughter actually is a flight attendant for United Airlines, and she listens to the show. And but Southwest will get you there for cheap.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
I think it was $89.
Yeah, it wasn't bad at all.
Yeah. Well, we didn't get the first class.
No, it definitely wasn't first class.
They were kind of like, here, you animals, just sit down. Talking about the whole Atlanta, it was a good. Georgia was a good vibe.
Yeah.
The people were down there were friendly. I had no problem with Georgia.
Nope.
I really enjoyed it.
Nope.
In fact, we plan to go back.
Oh, I look forward to going back. I really do.
Now, when we talk about the open house, they basically have just a metal building warehouse.
Yeah.
That they've got some of their tanks. There's tons of tanks, and Russell's got tons of video and audio, and it's just we have content for months at least.
Oh, yes, we do.
And
we really do.
And we made some really good friends down there, and the guys that let us go in and look at some of the restoration stuff. Seriously,
Yeah.
God bless you. And
Oh, I know.
You made two old guys very happy.
Exactly. Yes.
Russell actually got to hang out with a real Jag Tiger people. You should have seen him. His face, his smile was actually touching ear to ear.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And
it's just indescribable, the history and the tanks we got to see.
Did you want to do any more shout outs or any more?
Yeah, I just a couple more announcements here real quick. We're currently at about 50 likes on our Two Tankers and a Cat Facebook page. I do want to thank all of our fans that follow us on Facebook. If you haven't found us on Facebook yet, please search for Two Tankers and a Cat podcast and give our page a like. That's how we plan on getting any information out there. Show notes. You can find any show notes that we have on there for any podcasts we're putting out. And it'd also be helpful if you guys would share our podcast when it comes out on every other Tuesday on Facebook. If you guys shared that would be extremely helpful. We're also sitting at about 170 downloads so far of our podcasts.
That's awesome.
I know. It's just, we truly want to thank all those folks who's downloaded through Facebook off of podbean.com, which is our server site. We just want to thank you guys for listening to any of our past podcasts. It truly means a lot to us that you're enjoying the content that we're actually putting out there.
Let's go back to Fort Benning. We owe somebody there a big shout out.
Oh, yes, an extremely huge shout out. I would like to give a huge shout out to Mr. Rob Cogan, curator of the U.S. Army Armor and Calvary Collection there at Fort Benning.
You're the man.
Oh, you're darn right you are, man. You made our day. Actually, you probably made our year and even the next several years for what you did for us. Charlie and I really want to thank you for putting on the open house to begin with. And
just taking time out of his schedule.
Exactly.
This is a guy
yes.
that was in a ZZ Top fine dress man or sharp dress man suit that went out in the mud and pouring rain.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
cow peeing on a rock. And he smiled and took us out there and was extremely cool. You know, people say, oh, well, he did that because you're cops. And he goes, no, because you guys flew all the way from Pittsburgh, Kansas.
Exactly.
Here just to see this tank.
Yeah.
You know, props to you. But he could have been at home and, having a beer. His wife was cooking dinner. And he's out in the rain with us two.
Yeah.
Hey, would you mind if I just laid on the tank and just rolled around like I was eating catnip or something? He's like, all right, as long as you leave your clothes on.
And I do want to say that, in my eyes anyway, man, you got the best job ever. I mean,
absolutely.
I called it tank heaven, to be honest with you. If there is such a thing as a heaven for tank, I'm telling you, down there at Fort Benning it's got to be it.
Oh, we got to do another shout out there.
Yeah, I've got one more. The second shout out I'd like to give is to another gentleman that I met during this open house. We attended up there at Fort Benning on Veterans Day this year. That shout out goes to Charles Davenport from Georgia.
Oh, isn't he the modeler guy?
Yeah, Mr. Davenport informed me that he's been doing some 3D modeling of tanks. And he brought up that he's currently modeling the Chinese twin anti-aircraft 37 millimeter T-3485 tank.
Isn't that the one I spent? I kind of tricked you into going behind.
Yeah, it is. We
did not go behind a fence in a area on an Army base, and I didn't go in there and start rolling around on it.
No.
Maybe I shouldn't have been there. Maybe Russ was like, "Get back in the car so we can get out of here before the MPs come and shoot you in the face."
Oh, it wasn't quite that bad. He's embellishing the story a little bit.
Yes, yes.
But it was setting this summer. It was setting behind the museum there on the Fort Sill, Oklahoma Army base. And Charlie and
I spotted it and freaked out. I'm like, "Oh, go there, go there!" And he goes, "I don't think we're." I'm like, I'll do my time. Just let me on it."
But yeah, we'll talk about this particular tank in a future podcast coming up.
Now Davenport sent us some photos, didn't he?
Yes. He took all kinds of photos for his 3D modeling, and he actually forwarded those to me, which I very much appreciate. That was awesome of him to do that.
What about this National Armor and Calvary Heritage Foundation? Can we get some people to maybe back them up, send them some money, or get involved in there?
I thought I'd talk about that a little bit. The National Armor and Calvary Heritage Foundation. The decision to move the U.S. Army Armor Collection from Fort Knox, Kentucky, and the Aberdeen Proving Grounds, Maryland, made in response to a congressional mandate as a result of the 2005 Base Realignment and Closure Committee. A particular collection of armor actually exists to train current and future generations of armor and cavalry soldiers.
So we'd like to point out that at no point is this a museum. Yes, it had historical tanks in there, and we're going to talk about. We haven't even told people what we're talking about this episode. The Christie. We're actually going to talk about the Christie and the Christie suspension. But this is this isn't a museum. They actually use this to train current soldiers. Talk more about that, Russ. That's interesting.
Since all armor and cavalry training is now conducted at Fort Benning, Georgia, the collection was moved with the Armor School to maintain the ability to train and educate the current and future mounted forces. That was an Army decision based on a congressional order to actually make this move down to Fort Benning. The National Armor and Cavalry Heritage Foundation is a private, non-profit foundation dedicated to building a state-of-the-art facility and put portions of this collection back on public display so that we can expand our education on our history, service, and sacrifice to all.
Now, how can somebody support this foundation? Are we going to link that to our Facebook?
Yes, I will have that here in just a little bit, the information on how you can actually donate and support this particular foundation. The foundation will actually act as the voice of the Armor and Cavalry community to ensure the participation and inclusion of all stakeholders in the process. Stakeholders are defined as the Armor and Cavalry community, military veterans, Greater Columbus, Georgia community, the U.S. Army, and the communities that support the Army and the military. So pretty much what they're wanting to do, and that what we found out what their actual plans are, is that by 2020 they plan to build a larger facility that'll hold, what did we hear, about 200 tanks, I believe.
Right.
They're on the base at Fort Benning.
The building they're in now literally was almost busting with tanks.
I mean, what would you say? How many tanks was in that building? Maybe
what?
30, 40 maybe?
50?
Yeah, maybe up to 50.
It was jam-packed, people.
Yeah.
Literally, I could touch a tank and then stick my foot out and touch the side of a building.
Exactly.
From tank, it was
Yeah.
They barely separated. Where even I, as a fat guy, was like, some of these are really close together.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is they had refurbished tanks that they had just painted and are ready to go in that building, and they didn't have room for that building. And there was probably, another 40 to 50 out.
Oh, easy. I bet it was probably 50 to 75 that was out there in the lot that we seen, yeah.
And we're talking about, we saw a T-34, or no, a Su-100
Yeah.
Russian tank destroyer,
Yeah.
a T-30 American tank destroyer, big heavy one, just a Russian T-34 tank.
Yeah.
Just
And the Churchill what?
Churchill 7.
Yeah.
Saw the Churchill 7. Russ is like, get off the fence.
Oh, man.
I was like, I gotta touch it. And it was only like a few inches away from me.
Yeah.
I couldn't get to touch it.
I know.
But it's just sitting out there,
Yeah.
and they don't have a building for it.
Yeah, exactly.
And the foundation is
Yeah.
helping them.
Yes, the foundation is wanting to raise the money to build this building that'll hold about 200 tanks that are on Fort Benning. And what they want to do is continue having open houses, kind of like the one that we went to where the public will have access to it, but not just in a museum setting quite yet. What their next plan would be is to actually continue raising the funds and build a public museum that the public can go into and actually see some of these tanks.
Right. Now, they could still let the current military guys go out
yes.
there.
Yes, they will have access to all that for their training, yes.
Yeah, the lottery was $1.3 billion finally a couple weeks ago. If I won that type of money, that's what I'd spend it on.
Yes.
Trust me, I can buy $1 million worth of cigars and beach sand.
Yeah.
But, for to be known, have your name on a plaque somewhere for a museum, that's amazing.
I mean, just the tanks we've seen and the history there with those tanks in this collection is just incredible. I mean, it's something you probably won't ever see in the United States anywhere else.
Yeah. And guys like us and the guys down in Georgia and the military are busting their butt trying to make this stick around.
Yeah.
And believe me, people, there are people that would look at this and see scrap metal. They don't care about the tanks. They don't care about the history. They would melt all this down. You need to get involved.
Yep.
If you're going to change the world, you got to get up.
Yep. If you are interested in donating money to the National Armor and Calvary Heritage Foundation, you can contact them on their Facebook page, www.armorcalvaryheritagefoundation.org, and that link will be put on our Facebook when this episode comes out. Excellent. When you do go to that page, what you'll want to do is hit the big red donate button at the top of their website and help them get this extremely worthwhile cause off the ground, man. I mean, like I said, they're using these tanks to train our future soldiers.
And they're given a chance to keep the history.
Exactly.
This is something that we can do, people.
Yes.
Everybody's like, well, I'll donate $1. You think that's a joke? Donate $1.
Do it.
Good.
I challenge you.
Yeah. They don't care about the size of the donation.
No.
They're like, oh, what's $1 going to do? You know what? Buy a coat of paint.
Yeah.
Buy a bolt.
1,000 people gives $1. Yeah. What do you got?
Yeah.
I mean, holy cow.
What's that one song? If everybody, a million people donated $1,
yeah, that'd
be $1 million.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yep.
Hey, let's get on the tank now. I want to get talking about this Christie series of medium.
Yeah, John Walter Christie, born May 6th, 1865. He died January 11th, 1944. He was an American engineer and inventor, and he's best known for developing the Christie suspension system used in a number of World War II era tank designs. Most notably the Soviet BT and T-34 series, and the British Covenanter and Crusader cruiser tanks, as well as the Comet heavy cruiser tank. In 1916, with the First World War raging in Europe, he developed a prototype four-wheeled gun carriage for the U.S. Army Ordnance Board. But the Ordnance Board had set out strict guidelines for weapons, and Christie refused to revise his designs to suit their requirements. Christie's own personal stubbornness and his habit of offending those in the U.S. Army and Ordnance bureaucracy would have ramifications for the rest of his career.
Now, what we know about Christie is there's no doubt that he was a genius, but he was kind of a butthead.
Yeah.
You know, let's be honest.
Yeah.
A lot of people that we know that are geniuses, they have to have it their way. I remember we were down at the Fort Benning Museum, and they said one of the things, the concern with the ordnance people, they asked Christie, well, what happens when it breaks down? He goes, don't worry about it. My mechanics will fix it for you. Well, the U.S. Army is not going to hire.
Exactly.
They'll use their
They'll
mechanics.
use theirs, yeah.
And he's like, no, you're going to use mine.
Yeah.
Like, no, if we're going to pay for it, you know, we're going to give you a fair deal. We're going to give you cash, but you're going to train us how to use it. And he's
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
no.
Yep. The Christie medium tank, the M1919, was designed in an attempt to produce a tank that could operate on wheels or tracks. Yes, I said wheels or tracks, in order to reduce the number of vehicles breaking down before getting into action. During the First World War, Mr. Christie had produced a number of designs for gun motor carriages, including the wheel and track 8-inch GMC, which would carry an 8-inch howitzer and use 4 road wheels that could be run with or without tracks. After the war, Christie used this experience to produce a series of tanks that could operate with tracks when in combat, or just on their road wheels when out of combat.
So what you're saying is his plan was, if you were going to be using this on a daily basis, or you were driving to a battle place, that you would take off the tracks and use the road wheels, just drive normal. But if you were going off-road into combat, that's when they would put the tracks back on and go out in the trenches and stuff.
Yes.
Okay, I understand now.
The tracks just actually folded back up onto the fender, the way it was designed to work, and the tracks were actually kept there on the tank while they were driving down the road on the road wheels. But yeah, when they got back into the battle areas, they'd be able to just put the tracks on pretty easy and go from there.
Gotcha.
And the reason for this was that the tracks is probably one of the weakest points on the tank. I mean, that's where they had the most breakdowns from, was the failure of the tank tracks. I mean,
we're throwing tracks.
Yeah.
Any tanker knows that you're going to break tracks. So he's saying, great, let's take the tracks and use them when they need to be used.
Yeah, save the wear and tear on them. And
let's use them in combat, down in the trenches. But when you get back on the road, let's use tires.
Yeah.
That is intelligent.
Yeah.
That's a genius idea.
It is. It really is. His original idea was to produce a single chassis that could be used as either a tank or a truck. But this then evolved into the Christie medium tank, the M1919. On November 22nd, 1919, the Army ordered a single example of the M1919 from Christie's Front Drive Motor Company, but it took some time to sort out the details, and the final specification wasn't approved until June 8th of 1920.
I apologize. Lightning was sitting over here just pawing.
She is.
I apologize.
Yeah.
She has been super active, people. We need to video her.
Yes,
because everybody's like, why are they, starting and stammering? Let me say, there's nothing worse than cat butt in your face and you're trying to talk into a mic.
Yeah.
Like right now.
Yeah.
Russ, turn around and take a look where she's at. Go up here.
Oh.
Yeah, she's on the back of my chair.
On the back of his chair. Yeah.
Smacking me in the back of the head.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm around my mom again.
She's up and down all the time.
My mom smacked me in the head a lot. That explains probably a lot.
Yeah, it does.
We did get to see this Christie, and one of the things that you said that it could be used as a truck. One of the things I noticed on the back of the Christie, you could actually put a hitch back there and use it as a hauling vehicle too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So Christie was a genius.
He was.
He was just a terrible businessman.
Yeah, you put it correctly there. Yeah.
The customer's always right. No, they're not. You're a bunch of jerks.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's why he didn't stay in business.
Yeah. The M1919, it had a simple box hull split into the driver, gunner, and engine compartments. It had a circular, flat-sided turret with a flat top, and it was armed with a 57 millimeter gun and a large ball mount.
Now, the 57 was originally on the T-34-85. No, T-34 Russian tank. But there's an interesting story about that. Keep going, I'm sorry. Now, was it on a coaxial? The 57?
No. It also had a coaxial 30-inch machine gun along with the 57 millimeter gun. On top of the main turret was a smaller dome-shaped turret that carried a ball-mounted Browning machine gun.
Hot dog.
Both turrets had a 360-degree traverse. It was powered by a 120 horsepower Christie 6-cylinder engine.
Now, if you guys want to look up Christie, he was also big-time race car guy. He was I think that's how he got famous, was driving race cars, right?
Yes, that's where he got his start into the engineering part. Yes.
So he's like, hey, I can make a tank.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it go quick.
Heck yeah.
And I'm going to give it great guns and great ammo.
Yeah.
And give it a great suspension. Great idea.
It was.
Too bad he was a jerk.
The main selling point of the M1919 was its suspension. At this point, Christie had yet to develop the Christie suspension, for which he became famous, and the M1919 used a different system than that. It had 4 large wheels at the corners, each given rubber tires. The drive wheels were at the rear. In the middle was a center bogie with 2 further road wheels carried on coil springs. This bogie could be raised for trackless running or lowered if the tracks were installed, and could take the entire weight of the vehicle. The tracks were 15 inches wide and had teeth on the inside that engaged with holes in the frame of the rear drive wheels to provide the power.
Wow.
The M1919 was delivered to the Aberdeen Proving Grounds in February of 1921 and underwent tests that lasted until April 21st of that year, when Christie asked for them to, they wanted him to suspend that testing that tank while he made some modifications to the design.
Well, during that period, how many miles they put on that thing?
They put about 374 miles on this test M1919, of which 37 and a half of those were on tracks. It showed to have a top speed of about 7 miles per hour on the tracks and about 13 miles per hour on the wheels.
I'm going to beat the cat. Now, you say 7 miles per hour. That still beats what we had for the FT-17.
Oh, yes, by a long shot, yes.
So that's quick. And at 13 miles per hour, that's real quick.
Yes, yeah. They brought the rebuilt tank. Remember, he suspended the testing of the 1919. They brought the rebuilt tank to the Aberdeen Proving Grounds in March of 1922. In that gap, Christie had modified the suspension, removed the turret, and placed the main guns in the whole front. But the M1921 didn't impress the folks that were testing it, and tests of that ended in July of 1924.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're hearing somebody like hitting your mic, the cat is rubbing its face on the mic, and it's trying to jump on the back of Russ's chair. Lightning, we love you, but you gotta go, man.
Oh, man. Yeah, she's.
So basically, he made it from 7 miles an hour to 10. So he only added 3 miles per hour.
Yeah.
But back then, that's a huge leap.
Not bad, yes.
Give us some stats.
It had a crew of 3 people in it. It weighed about 13 and a half tons. Like I said earlier, it had the Christie 6-cylinder, 120 horsepower water-cooled engine. And
Oh, so it was water cooled, not air cooled like the rest.
Yeah.
All
Little
right.
step up there.
All right. So that's
It
a
had
bonus.
the 57 millimeter gun and then another machine gun. And get this, the armor all the way around was between about a 1/4 inch to 1 inch thick.
What? That's it?
That's it.
Well, I mean, that's the same armor.
Yeah.
That's better armor than the FT-17.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I want thicker armor.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's less than an inch and you're firing the 30-06 at me,
Yeah.
yeah,
I want
maybe
something a little thicker.
Yeah, but go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, the Christie medium tank M1921 was a greatly modified version of the earlier M1919. It was a turretless tank designed to be operated with or without the tracks, just like the first one was designed. It had 4 main road wheels, just like the first one, which could be used alone without the tracks. The M1921 was a significantly different vehicle to the M1919. The turret had been removed and a larger hull structure was installed. The combination gun mount from the turret had been installed in the front of the hull, and 2 more machine guns were carried on the front corners of the hull.
Again, I think Christie's a genius, but if you're taking away the turret, the Army will not like that.
Yeah.
They will not call it a tank.
Yeah,
So he's like, oh, I don't like the turret.
exactly.
It's not what you like, man. It's what you can sell.
Yeah. The crew was actually increased from 3 to 4 in the M1921.
Good.
It had 2 gunners in the nose, and the driver and the commander in the rear, in the center of the vehicle.
Good.
And the fuel capacity was also increased over the M1919.
So he's making good.
Yeah, he's making progress.
Okay.
The suspension was also modified. The rear drive wheels were unchanged and remained unsprung with holes for the track teeth to engage. The front wheel was mounted on coil springs installed in the sides of the front hull. The 2-wheel bogie was replaced with 2 larger road wheels, still smaller than the main wheels.
So he's making different changes to the vehicle.
Yes.
But if I remember right, it was the M1928 was the first design to use his Christie suspension, right?
Yes, that is correct.
If you get a chance, people, you need to go online and
Yes.
pull up a picture of the Christie suspension, because you will see it in some of the Russian tanks, and we're going to talk about that story here in a sec.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah. Some of the stats, he had 4 crew members, weighed about 14 tons. Didn't really add a lot of weight to it with this particular modification. Guns were about the same on the 1921.
But the speed's a lot different.
Yeah, maximum speed 14 miles an hour on the wheels. So he's getting the speed up there quite a bit. And like Charlie said a while ago, the next version of the Christie tank, medium tank, was the M1928. It was the first armored vehicle to use the famous Christie suspension and was thus the origin of a large number of later tanks. It was his first attempt to produce a tank capable of operating with or without the tracks. The M1919 and the 1921 had actually ended in failure, with the 1921 found to be unreliable and hard to maneuver. Mr. Christie returned to the drawing board and came up with a new suspension system, which he installed on the M1928. The new system used 4 large road wheels on each side of the vehicle, and each wheel was carried on a pivoting arm, which was supported by a large coil spring.
Well, now I have a question about cats for our audience. As you can hear in the background a little bit, Lightning is licking the back of my head. So if we have any cat owners, why does a cat want to lick people's arms and heads and hair.
Well, I might ask, when was the last time you washed your hair, though?
1987, 86.
That may have something to do with it.
Oh, see how rusty
Oh, I
picks
know.
on the fat kid.
Oh, man.
So you said it had 2 solid rubber tires with a gap between them.
Yeah, and that actually added a further level of suspension and also reduced the road noise as it was going down the road.
Nice.
Power went to the rear drive wheels, which were raised off the ground. When the M1928 was operating without its tracks, chains linked the drive wheels to the rear road wheels to provide the power.
Wow. So it still had that 57 millimeter gun.
Yeah, everything else was basically about the same. Yeah, I do want to mention that the M1928, we was talking about speeds earlier. It actually managed to average a speed of about 28 mile an hour on a run one time from Fort Meade to Gettysburg, going one way on tracks and the other on wheels.
Wow.
And in ideal circumstances, it could reach an impressive 70 mile an hour on wheels and 42 mile an hour on tracks. So he made a huge improvement on the speed with this version.
So when he finally got the suspension, and he got the motor right, and he's got his 57 millimeter, he's like, listen, this is the fastest tank around. This thing will do, what, 47?
He was starting to get
So the Army,
the attention of several other countries.
So the Army
by
was
this
now
time.
interested.
Yeah, the Army was interested, as well as actually the Soviet Union ordered 2 Christie tanks, which became the basis of the massive BT series of tanks, which saw extensive combat during the Second World War.
So basically, he didn't get along with the Army. He made this great tank will go 42 miles an hour. It's got a great gun. It's got great suspension. You can use tracks. He's came up with everything, and it's got armor.
Yeah.
But he's so hard-headed that the Army finally says, we're not going to deal with you.
Yeah.
You might have the best tank in the world, but we're just not going to order you. So he goes to the Soviet Union, and he tries to sell it over there. Did they actually buy it, or did they just take delivery of it? I think they did buy maybe one, or they ordered 2, but they never paid him. And the funny thing is, and this is not an insult against the Soviet Union. I know we have listeners in the former Soviet Union, and a lot of people like Russian military tanks. We're just saying at that point, Christie had sent these cars over, or these tanks, and the Russians, or the Soviets at the time, were like, oh yeah, we can tell you're a genius, and you're so smart, and da da da. And he's like, yep, I'm great. We're going to order a couple of these. They took his design and didn't pay him a dime.
Yeah.
Told him beat feet. He's like, hey, somebody's got to, write me a check. And they're like, yeah, it's in the mail, Jack.
Too late.
So you should have probably been a little bit cooler with the Americans and got your money.
Yeah.
Because the American military will pay for its tanks.
Yeah.
The Russians, Stalin, Comrade Stalin wasn't going to write you a check.
Yep.
But he was going to take your design, buddy. Not a good business plan.
We mentioned that the speeds of this particular model of the Christie medium tank was greatly improved over the previous designs. 42 mile per hour on the tracks and about 70 mile an hour on the wheels. And the biggest reason for that is, not sure what they took out of it, but the tons went from about 13 tons down to 8.6 tons on this design. So that probably took a lot of weight off of it to help out the speed.
Yeah, maybe we're not using such a heavy iron. Maybe we're using more steel, and instead of using rivets,
or looking down welds. Here, it looks like they down the armor down to just half inch, probably all the way around. That probably had a little bit to do with it.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, one of the other things, he had a motor in that thing called a Liberty, right?
Yeah.
And it was a 12-cylinder.
Yeah, Liberty V12 at 338 horsepower, so that was a lot more power.
A lot more power. But remember, people, I think we talked about the Pershing last episode with its 500 horsepower. This is what, a couple hundred behind it?
Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
Man, that Pershing was underpowered.
It was. The Christie M1931, the medium tank T3 combat car T1, was the first of Christie's tanks to be accepted for production by the U.S. Army and was used in small numbers by the infantry as the medium tank T3 and the cavalry as the combat car T1. So you had the infantry, Army infantry, that used it as the medium tank T3, and then the cavalry actually called the same tank the combat car T1.
Now, for our friends that played the digital tanks, I think even in War Thunder, they don't have the T1 combat car. They actually have the T7. And basically, it's the T1 here in reality is the same thing. So if everybody's wanting to see what a combat car looks like, you'd want to type in T7 combat car.
The Army decided to order a tank based on the M1928, equipped with a 37mm gun and a full traversing turret. The first of these was delivered as the M1931 early in 1931 and was the first of 7 to be produced by Christie for the U.S. Army. When used by the infantry, they were known as the convertible medium tank T3, and like I said before, when they were used by the cavalry, they were called the combat car T1.
Right. Now, what people don't know at this point, the Russians are redoing their entire lines with his design. This will soon turn into the BT series, and the T-34 will still originally have that 57mm gun and the Christie suspension.
Yeah.
So Christie's seeing millions of these T-34s and BT tanks, and he's like,
Yeah.
hey, that's my...
Whoops.
Well, maybe you should have
Yeah.
got a better deal, buddy.
Yeah. The next version of the medium Christie tank would be the medium tank T4, or the medium tank M1. It was the last medium tank to use the Christie-style convertible running gear and was based on the combat car T4. It self-developed from the Christie M1931, or the medium tank T3. In 1933, the Rock Island Arsenal then produced a modified version of the design as the combat car T4. This was about 1 ton lighter at 9.6 tons. It used the Christie suspension system, was entirely armed with machine guns, and had sloped frontal armor. The next version here, the medium tank T4 was also built at the Rock Island Arsenal and was partly based on the combat car T4. Same length as the combat car, but wider and slightly higher. The T4, I believe...
Well, I know it got up to, about 37 miles per hour?
Yeah.
But remember, we're talking about this combat car, and I know it's a lot of technical stuff, but it was very fast, but it was more of a combat car than a tank.
Yeah.
But it's important to understand that the Christie system and everything and the speed of these tanks are coming along to give you a better idea of what the Scout tanks were starting to look into.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The T4, which was the last version of the Christie tank. This was the one we actually got to see at the U.S. Army Armor and Cavalry Collection at Fort Benning, Georgia, when we went down there on Veterans Day.
And it's an amazing tank. We actually got to look inside, and this is one that the Army had that Christie actually built for them, I believe, correct?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And again, great tank, great idea, just had no business sense.
Yeah.
Couldn't get along with the Army.
Yeah, that is true. I believe that kind of wraps up our...
Well, how long have we been going?
Oh, wow. We've been going about 45 minutes so far this evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize to make it so long, but we have so much fun, and we want to get you to get into contact with us more and give us ideas that tanks you want us to talk about or things that you want to clarify. I've been called out a couple of times on some mistakes that I've been making in translations. There's people out there that speak German, and they're like, you keep saying Jagdpanzer, and it's not actually, Jag, and it's, please send us, correct on how to speak these cities and stuff like that we keep messing up on. Can you give us some other contact information, Russ?
Yeah, you can always email us at twotankersandcat@gmail.com, twotankersandcat@gmail.com. You can always find us there on the Podbean website, twotankersandcat.podbean.com. Facebook, if you haven't liked us yet on Facebook, please do.
We need help.
Yes, big time on that. Like I said, I believe we're up to about 50 likes so far at the taping of this podcast here. And, I mean, share us out there.
Can you imagine the Lightning the Cat compared to all the other weird cats like Grumpy Cat and everything else? And she was only getting 50 likes.
Yeah.
That's outrageous.
Oh, I know.
An internet cat with only 50 likes.
She told me the other day it kind of makes her sad. We can also be found on iTunes, the Android Play Store podcast site, and TuneIn. I did just recently add us to the TuneIn podcasts. If you have TuneIn set up with your Amazon Alexa, you can even listen to us now using your Amazon Alexa.
Every time you say Alexa, your light
she
comes on.
She comes on. Yeah,
Speech is always improving, and I might not have it quite right.
Yeah, she's talking to me now. Whoops.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and end this podcast. This is Charlie.
And this is Russell. And until next time, happy tanking.